Okay, we're going to get started. To respect your time, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Great to see all of you on today's webinar, Aligning Teacher Registered Apprenticeships for Quality Assurance. This webinar is co-hosted by the Association for Advancing Quality and Educator Preparation, simply known as AAQEP, and the National Center for Grow Your Own. Today's webinar will explore how registered teacher apprenticeships align with AAQEP's accreditation standards and quality assurance, and how educator preparation programs can successfully integrate apprenticeship models into their accreditation processes while maintaining high quality and innovation. My name is Carla Warren. I'm a senior partner with the National Center for Grow Your Own. My background includes 36 years in public education in the state of West Virginia, where I spent 20 years in the classroom and 16 years in state education agency work, leading initiatives around mentoring, teacher induction, working with teacher licensure, educator preparation, and most recently with the Grow Your Own Pathway and Youth Apprenticeship in my state. So we're very excited to have joining us today from AAQEP, Mark LaSalle Peterson and Linda McKee. So I'm going to turn it over to you to Mark to introduce yourself. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Carla, and welcome everyone. Looking at the participant list, good to see so many names and many names of folks we know. So glad you're all here today. I'm Mark LaSalle Peterson. I'm the president of AAQEP. We're a quality assurance agency that we just celebrated our 8th annual quality assurance symposium last week, and we're delighted to be hearing from our members all the work that they're doing in broadening the models of service, including teaching teacher registered apprenticeship programs. So happy to be here today. Linda.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Carla. Welcome to everyone. I'm Mark's sidekick, by the way, okay? So just in case you all wonder about that, I'm the Chief Operations Officer for AAQEP, and I'm happy to be here and can't wait until I can get a chance in just a couple of minutes to give you a little bit of an overview about AAQEP. And excited to hear your questions.
By the way, that does mean she's the one that's kicking.
You're the side and she's the kick. Great.
Yep.
I love it. Well, we're so glad that you're here today. So today's conversation is going to focus on the intersection of accreditation and registered teacher apprenticeship, emphasizing how these programs can ensure quality and rigor in educator prep. We're going to look closely at AAQEP's quality assurance process and how it supports the development of competent, well-prepared educators within the apprenticeship framework. So we want to acknowledge today that everyone on the webinar may be at different places on the continuum of knowledge about accreditation and perhaps about teacher registered apprenticeship. So we wanted to give a brief overview of our organizations and give you some resources that maybe you can go back and look at later if you have additional interests. So I'd like to share with you today some information about the National Center for Grow Your Own. So the National Center for Grow Your Own is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we were formed by the Human Capital Leadership Team at the Tennessee Department of Education in 2022. So our work is to support states, districts, EPPs who either want to launch or expand registered apprenticeships in teaching and or principalship and grow your own pathways. So our definition for a grow your own pathway is a clear articulated pathway for an aspiring educator to become a teacher and get paid to do so. And we look at that from the lens of the U.S. Department of Labor. So we've heard many times about apprenticeships, teacher residencies, internships, and all of those are great ways to prepare our teachers. But it's a little bit different when it's a registered apprenticeship under the U.S. Department of Labor, because this allows a portable, nationally recognized credential for that individual who completes the apprenticeship. So a registered apprenticeship is an industry-driven, in this case, employee-driven, high-quality career pathway where the employer, which is going to be the school district, develops and prepares their future workforce. This includes paid work experience, progressive wage increases, classroom instruction, and it culminates in a teaching degree or a teaching license or a degree. So there are some core actors in an apprenticeship program. There must be a sponsor. Most often it's a state education agency, but it can also be a district, and it can be an educator preparation provider. The employer is going to be that school district. The related technical instruction provider is going to be the educator preparation program. And then we have to make sure that in a registered apprenticeship that the state apprenticeship agency or the USDOL apprenticeship office, depending on what state you're in, is engaged in this process as well. And then there are some key elements to a registered apprenticeship program. Key features include a minimum of 2,000 hours of training, the progressive wage schedule. As the apprentice gains and masters competencies, their wage schedule increases. The related instruction, that's the coursework that is taking place through the EPP partnership. The on-the-job competencies, which are written into that apprenticeship application, and many times those are aligned with NTAS standards, the teacher evaluation standards in the state, or Charlotte Danielson's framework, or Marzano. It depends on how that apprenticeship program is built. And then critical that there is an apprenticeship journey worker arrangement. And in layman's terms, as educators, that just means a mentor who is going to support that apprentice through the process, as well as a fair and transparent apprentice selection. So looking at, in a nutshell, what is a registered apprenticeship? It really is an apprentice who completes a degree program from an educator preparation program, earning a degree and teacher certification while they are engaged in hands-on experience, on-the-job training in a K-12 classroom under the guidance of a mentor teacher. And very important, it is an earn and learn model where that apprentice is a full-time employee while they are working under that mentor teacher, moving toward a degree and teacher certification in our schools. So in a nutshell, we know that as of November 2024, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, and I'm almost certain this number has gone up, registered apprenticeships and teaching programs are now in 46 states, including DC and territories. So this number continues to grow. We know there's an appetite for registered apprenticeships and teaching. We know that it is flexible and it meets the needs of our state staff, our people who are wanting to become teachers, our target populations. So looking at what we're talking about today with AAQEP is how can we intersect teacher registered apprenticeships with the desire for these individuals to become teachers through a registered apprenticeship program and accreditation. So Linda, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Carla. I'm really excited about talking about this integration that we can do. But just to begin, AAQEP's approach to accreditation is a little bit different, looking at quality assurance and continuous improvement. When we're talking about that, we're really thinking about how do we reframe our profession's conversation. So on this next slide, we've got that reframing our profession's conversation, really thinking about in 2017, we brought together a group of professionals in the field from 14 states, and they went into 3 working groups to design the process. This is one where they had the expectations framework, looking at the standards. We talked about the process and we talked about consistency. And on our next slide, we have our vision and mission that we talked about also. Really important to think about that evidence-based process, really thinking of the evidence and thinking about what it is that we can do in order to bring back high public confidence in what is happening in educator prep and across the field in education. So of course, our vision is there, hoping that we're going to get there, and that we also have the mission supporting that process. We started with 8 operational principles. These principles are really straightforward, that they cover everything that we do and the way we work both internally and externally. You can see them as we look at across the slide there. Collaboration, working together with all of our groups, breaking some of those silos, really thinking about innovation and what does that mean to you, partnerships, thinking about those partnerships, talking about that. And then also being very comprehensive, because this is the key to what's happening with the apprenticeships, is that we can be very comprehensive and open to that, because we're open to a lot of different types and models of educator preparation programs. And on the next slide, we're continuing on. The context is the one way that people tell us that when they talk about AAQEP, they're like, you respect our context. That is so important, to respect that context. And then continuing to look then at the consistency, because even with different programs and different models, we need that consistency across the board for our instruments that we're using, our reviews, and the decision making. Efficiency and frugality, I'd like to think that those are just taken for granted, that that's where we would be. And sharing is an important one because, again, building that high public confidence. We have some books out now that are really talking about that and sharing that information. In fact, they are two of them out available at the moment that are part of a series that we're going to move forward with. So thinking about that, those operational principles really have guided us and have guided the over 200 APP members that we now have. 156 of those are presently accredited, and some are moving into their second cycle anytime now. We're in 36 different states and quite a few other jurisdictions, as a matter of fact, and then 22 state partnerships at this moment. So you could see under that one list, the population includes a very broad scope of accreditors, a population of providers, and that we can take through an accreditation process, but it's really a quality assurance and improvement process. So happy to really work with all of them. Looking at those expectations framework that we did. And remember, back when I just spoke a moment ago, we had that one group that was very specific about thinking of those expectations, and they did design the 2018 standards. Now, having said that, here's our 4x4 showing you what the 2018 standards look like. They all had 6 aspects. But we move now into our 2025 standards because our bylaws do require us to take a look at that and make those revisions every 7 years. And so having again brought together groups around the nation to help us to redesign those standards so that they are meeting the needs, the present needs, they are more relevant now, and they were published in 2025. The next slide is going to give us the implementation timeline for those. So if you're thinking about AAQEP, contact me. We'll talk about exactly what that timeline means to you specifically and using those standards. Most of the people at this point are obviously transitioning into our 2025 standards. So it's a good opportunity for you to really look at those on our website. But having said that, we have 2 pathways. AAQEP has really looked at how can we help people to do this transition into a quality assurance process. And so we have one pathway that is an initial accreditation. It's for 5 years. And then we have one that is more common, the 7-year accreditation pathway. So both of those are outlined here. They're very have a lot of similarities, but they have some minor differences. We have webinars available for you to really hear about those, hear about an introduction to AAQEP on a much broader scale, and then hear about the initial accreditation and how to write the reports. In fact, we have a whole series of webinars to help you through the entire process. So our role, we feel, is to support you so that you can meet those needs of being a high quality, having a high quality assurance system. And I'm positive that if you are going to be working with your apprenticeships, that Carl is going to help you a little bit with that. And we're going to be available to answer some questions on it.
Thank you, Linda. So as we move through the presentation today, Ben's going to pop into the chat some additional links if you want to go to the National Center for Grow Your Own's website or AAQEP's website to get more information, as well as a link that provides a webinar titled Apprenticeship 101. So if you're interested in more information about either of those, we'll pop those links into the chat. So several of you sent some questions when you did your registration, so we're going to weave those in as we discuss today, but we'll also stop about 10 minutes to the hour to allow some time for Q&A. While we're moving through the discussion, please feel free to pop your questions into the chat and we'll try to address those as we move along as well, so that we have plenty of time to address any concerns or questions that you might have. So we're going to kick it off by asking, how does AAQEP's flexible accreditation framework support a diverse educator pathway, including apprenticeships? What ways can programs leverage this flexibility to ensure high quality preparation while meeting the unique needs of their candidates that may be a full-time working professional in an apprenticeship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Carla. That's a great question, and it's great to be back. I'll just say this is the second time we've had a conversation together, and I think each time that comes around, I know I've learned more, and especially from conversation with our members and with others that are beginning to implement apprenticeships. I think the first key point to make is that for AAQEP accreditation is based on outcomes. And so we're looking at the outcomes of the competencies that have been developed by apprentices or other candidates as they're going through their programs. And that has allowed us to have flexibility or to be almost agnostic about the model of preparation. One of the beautiful things about the field of educator preparation today is that there are more ways for more people to become teachers than ever before. And so we see our job as an agency as working with folks using all different models of preparation in order to ensure that the outcomes are equivalent, that all candidates from all programs are coming through and becoming effective teachers or other educators, whatever they're preparing to be. One of the other things in our system is we do encourage innovation, and so as I've thought about today, I'm thinking about two different EPP audiences or would-be EPP audiences, namely folks who already have a program where they're preparing teachers, they're already approved in the state, they're already granting certification, or rather recommending for certification. So I know we have members and other EPPs that aren't our members that are building registered apprenticeship programs into their framework. From AAQEP's perspective, that works great because the related technical instruction is there in the content of the program. The assessment system is there as well. So it's a matter of weaving in this new model and just ensuring that the program is accessible to the apprentices as they're doing their demanding day job in the company of their journey worker teacher as well. So we're very aware that there are multiple ways of going about things. So for folks that already have a program, it's the question of how do you fit that best to those apprentices rather, and to meeting their needs. I think accreditation standards can also be really useful if you're standing up a program uh, new, really employer-based, and trying to figure out how to work with related technical instruction providers, maybe bringing a new role for a community college, for example, that might be working to provide some of that instruction. I think our standards can be very useful in helping think about how to frame that out and to develop an assessment system that is going to focus on the outcomes, because that's a key part of what we're doing.
And then, of course, for National Center for Grow Your Own, one of our key goals is accessibility. So
Mhm.
by having that flexibility in place, we can create accessible pipelines for teachers wherever they fall on that trajectory, wherever they start. There are multiple on-ramps. We like to think of it as a highway, that there are
Mhm.
multiple on and off ramps. So by AAQEP providing that flexibility through accreditation, that gives that working adult the opportunity to engage in a pipeline access that they wouldn't otherwise have. And then really looking at how can we leverage that job embedded learning. That's a huge piece here, is how can we access that on the job learning piece, that earn as you learn model, and give those apprentices the opportunity to earn credit or to master competencies while they are actually in a classroom learning on a daily basis. Okay, let's move on to the next thought. How can apprenticeship models and competency-based preparation ensure quality and rigor? What strategies help alignment coursework, mentorship, field experience-based training, while maintaining accreditation and licensure requirements? There's a balancing act there. So how can programs use data and peer learning networks to enhance accreditation and continuous improvement? So I'm going to hop in there first because one of the questions that we received in the registration said, what data are teacher registered apprenticeships collecting? And that's a great question. So it requires a little bit of history. The K-12 teacher occupation was approved by the U.S. Department of Labor in November of 2021. The first teacher registered apprenticeship program was registered with the Tennessee Department of Education in January of 2022. The second was registered in May of 2022 in West Virginia under a youth apprenticeship model. So when we think 3 years ago, we're looking at 1 or 2 programs, and now we have more than 46 states and territories that have registered apprenticeships in teaching. So we know that the longitudinal data as far as how many apprentices completed a program and stayed in a classroom for 5 years. We know that doesn't exist because the program is not old enough. However, and this is a conversation that we've had with our accreditors, that there are multiple data points that can be collected that indicate success and program progression. So for example, you could look at demographic and enrollment data that could be collected at entry and exit. Key demographic data, looking at program participation and progress data that you could collect continuously, monthly or quarterly, looking at how many related instruction hours has the apprentice completed, how many on-the-job learning hours has that apprentice completed, what are the coursework grades, what is their attendance, looking at mentor coaching logs, and then of course the employment data, which ties into the U.S. Department of Labor. Looking at RAPIDS, which is the U.S. Department of Labor data collection system, looking at the wage salary at start and upon completion. That's a key data point, their employment status. And then, of course, looking at licensure passage rates, looking at certification and licensure milestones. And then we always have to think about our qualitative data as well. Are we looking at focus groups? Are we doing exit surveys, perception surveys, looking at mentor satisfaction, apprentice satisfaction? So there are a lot of data points that can be collected that are valuable over and above the completion and retention data that will come. And you can also tie it into some of the longitudinal tracking that's done through your workforce development boards, through your state education agencies. And the question that was submitted asked what kind of scales and tools are being used. So the RAPID system is the U.S. Department of Labor tracking system. Of course, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act has a data matching system as well, looking at your data offices in your state education agencies or in your districts, looking at statewide longitudinal data systems. So really just looking at a wide variety of data points that can be used. And then Linda, I'm going to turn it back to you to talk about what that looks like in the accreditation process for AAQEP.
Well, listening to you, Carla, really, it ties in so well with the fact that, yes, we do require multiple measures. I mean, that's pretty common in all accreditors, right? But the thing of it is that we have a lot of flexibility in it. We do want you to have that criteria of success that you determine. You would give us that information and collect the evidence based on that. But it really is looking at those multiple measures of the candidate readiness, thinking about how you're demonstrating those competencies. The interesting thing with AAQEP, though, is that we are very aware that in some situations, people feel like they have to collect a certain amount of the data, all right, and the evidence. So we're pretty flexible and understanding about the fact that we've asked you to have an improvement process. We've asked you to do innovative things. And sometimes that data is not available immediately. So that's where you would be putting in an action plan to give us an idea of exactly what it is that you are going to collect and how you're going to use those measures, right? And then what that criteria of success is. So it's something where you don't want to stop thinking about this being accredited just because you don't have a certain number or a certain time frame of the data. It's really thinking about, all right, let's put in our report. Let's talk about where are we going to go and how are we going to collect that. So it's thinking about, those having those structures in place and those, the models that really do make a difference, and the models are tied into those competencies. And as Mark said earlier, tied into those outcomes. Mm-hmm. So Mark, you want to jump in and add just a little bit more there?
I'll add just one thing. Carla, all the data sources that you outlined and all the possibilities really feed into the possibility of following candidates' progress and ensuring that the apprentices are being supported and being successful. Those are some wonderful outcome and indicators. I'll just tie back to something you said earlier, which is that within a school district, performance is also evaluated, thinking about a Marzano framework or thinking about a Danielson framework, thinking about the INTAS standards, thinking about whichever state, to give a nod to our context concern, whatever state you happen to be in, there are going to be expressions of what performance expectations are. And we want apprentices rather, to be very aware of those and accustomed to being evaluated along those. So in addition, AAQEP has a sort of 360 perspective on this. We say that if you're making the case for completer competence, you need to have the related technical instructors perspective on that. You need to have the classroom mentor's perspective on that in doing evaluation, and you need to have the look back perspective from completers and from employers. So you need that 360 view. And I think the only thing I would elevate a little bit is we really want to see that the competencies are documented, that the apprentices know their content well, know how to deliver their content well, know how to do the assessment that's required, know how to create a productive learning environment, how to attend to the full range of students' needs, know how to connect with families, know how to connect, right? All those things that are listed in our standards 1 and 2, and that are the heart and soul of state standards for teachers as well, right? To ensure that those job competencies are documented and shown to be in place.
Yeah. And Carl, I want to go back also to you listed so many different ways of collecting that evidence. And that is one thing where AAQEP is extremely open and supportive, both quantitative and qualitative research models. Let's use those different methods, and really think about that, because sometimes we're going to get information that's going to be so much more powerful when we look at both versions of both models, both research models. So.
Well, and I appreciate AAQEP's lens that qualitative data is valuable. I think too often we disregard that, and I think that we can garner some really valuable information when we talk to people and do an apprentice. We're working with a state client right now, and they're just finishing their first year, and we're doing a survey. What's going well, what needs to be improved, where are the challenges, and that survey is something that will give us information from the EPP perspective. It will give us information from the apprentice, from the mentor perspective, and all it does is serve to strengthen the program. So moving along that same line, how can programs, if you're talking to an EPP program right now, or a district or state employer, how can programs incorporate non-traditional pathways like apprenticeship into accreditation reviews, addressing program standards while maintaining program flexibility? We know that it's just starting to occur, and we're looking for models of where it's going to work effectively. But from your lens, how can we incorporate those flexible pathways?
Um, I had a wonderful time talking with some of our members last week at our Quality Assurance Symposium, who were talking about their beginning work in registered apprenticeship programs. And their approach was very positive. They said, well, we know that we have the curriculum in place already, and we've worked with many of the schools already. And so we're just delighted to have this opportunity to have our candidates now serve as apprentices, placed in those programs. And as they've understood their job, it's to make sure that the curriculum is accessible, to make sure that they do connect to the job embedded learning that's going on, and maybe alter when and where they do some assessments. Engaging a little bit of different assessment practice, but again, staying within the structure of the assessment system that they've already developed, which is generally very flexible. So for folks that have a good quality assurance system in place and have worked closely with school partners, it's sort of let's get started. Let's put these individuals, help these individuals get started in their apprenticeship role, and then figure out what do we have to do to ensure that the curriculum is accessible. Do we need to shift the time when things are done? Do we need to have a different blend of asynchronous and synchronous? We all have wonderful tools like the Zoom platform that we're using right now to be able to engage with people, and we've got wonderful learning platforms coursework platforms that we can use. So it's just a matter of making sure you get everything lined up so it works to support those individuals in the best way possible as they're going through.
Yeah, and I'm going to add a little bit too about our self-study reports, because when you reach the point of having of sending us the self-study report, you've looked at all those pieces and have really you did the disaggregation, about exactly which pieces work based on those assessments. Like Mark said, looking at your assessment system and thinking about that. Sometimes it's just adding some different components to the assessment system, but sometimes they're so well aligned that it's an easy report to write and integrate those apprenticeships into them. So, and I think that we've had some good conversations with some of our members who are really moving forward with this.
And I'll just add one more thing. In our standards, if you take a look at them, you'll see that there's a strong emphasis on working together with school partners to get everything done, and honoring the school partner perspective and bringing the school partner into the assessment process, the data reporting process, everywhere, all along the way. So I would say in many ways, the registered apprenticeship model is actually a very strong one and really opens the door for some of the kinds of collaboration that everyone strives for, but that is more baked into the program when you have that model in place. So it's a tremendous advantage.
Yeah, I've heard people say that standard 4 is so much easier when you have that apprenticeship model in place, because that's integrating all those partnerships, Mark. That was a great point. Yeah.
Right. And if I would say that COVID didn't have a lot of positives, but one positive from COVID is that our teaching population, our apprenticeship population has a higher level of knowledge about how to access those learning platforms and to engage with Zoom. Where I mean, you talk about learning by immersion. That was what happened when we had to utilize those to teach and utilize those in our classrooms and our state education agencies. So really thinking about building on what you just said, looking at the opportunity for innovation is so exciting as an educator. I think about, we always want to keep creating something new and exciting that's going to impact our students, and being able to create those programs that allow that flexibility to look at the competency and validate that through the on-the-job learning and have that count for their college credit or count for their accreditation is really exciting. And you mentioned, Mark, partnerships. Partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. I know when we look at the next prompt that we have, how can collaboration between districts, EPPs, and state leaders enhance the effectiveness of apprenticeship programs? What successful strategies have been used to foster strong partnerships and align goals for educator preparation?
Linda, I'll maybe jump in first, and then please you add as well. Well, I think just like partnership is the way to think about things. I think communication is the key to having it move forward. And as school districts and their related technical instruction partners or EPPs are working together, it does require a new level of communication and sharing back and forth, and in both directions. From the EPP side, it probably means being a little bit more open to some different ways of structuring the learning experiences, of capturing them, of assessing them, and working them into the coursework in a different way. You might not plan out your whole syllabus, or you might not have all the details down, because if you're integrating it with the flow of work that's going on in the school year life of that apprentice, right? Some things may need to get moved around a little bit more. One thing that we've seen from the school district side is sometimes the teachers are a little bit uncomfortable evaluating colleagues, giving feedback to colleagues, and maybe I shouldn't even use that E word, but giving feedback in a real direct way to colleagues, and the apprentice really is there as a paid member of the school community and working. So I think it's very important that an atmosphere be established where folks feel really free to comment back and forth, because that's how you provide the support. And so I think it's very important that the formative feedback system be incredibly strong in those partnerships, right? Because everybody's learning, everybody's innovating, and trying things. And of course, apprentices rather are bringing new ideas into what they're doing in the classroom as well. So it's an even I guess more in-depth opportunity just for that communication that really strengthens everyone. Because there's good feedback into the curriculum with EPP as well, in terms of making sure things are up to date and approached from a different way. Linda, what would you like to throw in?
I was smiling when I read this question, okay, because it ties back into this operational principles so well. That if you think about the operational principles that I'd listed, the 8, and I know I went through them very rapidly, but it ties back to that collaboration, to the partnerships, to the context. These are the things that are so key to what we do with AAQEP and our ethos and our mindset of everything that we do. So the collaboration is important across the board. That's all there is to it for us. Really trying hard to build those relationships and sustain
And
them.
I would add to what Mark was saying, I think it's important to acknowledge the paradigm shift that has to take place between a journey worker and an apprentice in relation to a mentor and a beginning teacher, because for decades, we have trained our mentors that they are not in an evaluative role, they're in a supportive role, and there's a firewall there between evaluation and the mentor and the new teacher. So this is a new paradigm shift in a lot of places, because the apprenticeship is the journey worker is in an evaluative role for the apprentice.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
but
Carla,
I
if I,
think Mark,
oh,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Linda. Go ahead.
I was I think we have to stop thinking about the evaluation as a bad word.
Right.
I think that's the whole key to that, is that, yes, we give feedback all the time, I mean, we've got that phrase, critical friends and all. So we have to watch the context of that also. So
Mhm.
Good
go for it,
point.
Mark.
And I think we could make a nice chart out of this and include it in some future presentation. Well, because what I'm thinking, Carla, is in addition, folks who have been doing mentoring of new teachers for years in a school district are used to mentoring someone who comes in with a complete set of skills already. They're novices, but they've been through a program. They've been through a
Right.
clinical experience already. In this case, you're starting with someone who says, "Here I am, ready to do the work. Help me learn. Help me do it." But you're starting at a different level. I love what you said earlier, that the apprenticeship model lets folks enter the profession from different starting points, different levels of
Right.
experience. It might be a paraprofessional who's almost ready to teach on their own already because they know the kids, know the families, know the school, know the curriculum, been there, been watching it, ready to go. It might be someone coming in who says, "I know this is what I want to do. Heaven help me. Where do I start?" And that's all right too, right? But it's a different task for that school-based mentor than taking a graduate of a program at a bachelor's or master's level who says, "I'm here and I want your coaching and your guidance." It's a different relationship, and I think that's something we all have to learn our way into and maybe describe in some ways, some richer ways as we gain more experience.
Sure. And when we tag on to the thought about the collaboration, cooperation, communication, that really aligns well with one of the questions that we received in the registration. And that question asked, what strategies do you suggest to begin the district visioning process for implementing this apprenticeship program? So I think back to my own work in West Virginia, and I'll spare you the details, but really the superintendent came to me and said, I'm pulling careers and education out of the career technical division, and I want you to create an academic pathway that has dual enrollment. And I want these students to graduate from high school with 1 year of college education. Come back next week and tell me what you came up with. So when you think about that, and I didn't know any better, I went and did it. So when you think about what those strategies look like, I would just offer from my own experience, if you're at the beginning of this process, that you want to start with a needs assessment. You want to look at what are your retention rates, what are your teacher vacancy trends, what are your demographics, where are your licensure bottlenecks, what are your workforce needs, and what is the capacity you have in your district or state to make this work? What does it look like? Do you have a designated staff member? Do you have the support of your stakeholders? What does that look like? And then you have to start building ownership and capacity within your district or your state. That might include your principals, it includes your state leadership, it might include your legislature, it might include your HR director. So start looking at who are those stakeholders, definitely your deans and your provost and your presidents. Who are those stakeholders that can support the development of this work? Your union officials in many states is important. Your community colleges, don't forget your community colleges. And then start making that vision become a reality. Start mapping out what that career pathway is going to look like. Start mapping out, are you going to focus on your youth population? Are you going to focus on your paraprofessionals? What population are you going to target? And I've always told my first graders that they eat an elephant one bite at a time. So you don't want to jump in you don't want to go on all the on-ramps at the same time, but start looking at who is that target population you're going to start with. I'll throw in a commercial. The National Center for Grow Your Own acquired Subschool, and it was announced actually publicly today. And Subschool is an online learning platform that supports the development of your substitute teachers. If you look at some districts across the nation, we know that they're being staffed by a lot of substitute teachers. So one way that we're hoping to improve is to provide opportunities to build the expertise of those substitute teachers, with the understanding that about 34% of substitute teachers have a desire to become a teacher. They're an aspiring educator. So looking at what those flexible pathways are, and how can we create those pathways so that a career changer, a community member, a high school student, a teacher coming out of an ed prep program, how can we create pathways that are flexible so that these students can work in an apprenticeship and complete the requirements? So that's part of your visioning process. And then really looking at the USDOL apprenticeship application. And of course, the National Center for Grow Your Own is available to support you there as well. But looking at what that related instruction coursework outline is going to be. And it's very important to engage your community in your four-year colleges when you're deciding on what that RTI is going to look like. What is that on-the-job learning experience going to look like? How are you going to train those journey worker mentors so that they can provide high-quality support to those apprentices? So lots of collaboration, partnerships, and communication. Those are absolutely three critical elements if you're at the start of this work or if you're in the middle of this work, for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to give something a little more down to earth on that one, okay, Carla? All right, because from my perspective, anytime you're going to think about even starting with one of this, that needs assessment is where you started, Carla. That's exactly what is needed. All right, start with the SWOT analysis. All right, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Start with the SWOT analysis using all of your stakeholders, having all of them at the table with you, so that then the next thing I would do is build the needs assessment. That assessment system is so important, right? Because with the assessment system, that's when you have an idea, how are you going to measure where you want to be, right? And technically that needs to be in place before you start building all the rest of it. So that's a really, really important piece. Carla, I loved everything you said. I'm so thrilled that this one is being recorded so that I can capture everything that you said. Thank you so much. I'm just going to say the first thing that I did with any program, build the assessment system and see exactly what that means and where do you want to go, because you've got to have an idea exactly where you're going to go. And we're familiar with that in education because we do backwards mapping all the time. So think about that. That would be the one piece that I would add.
I think it would be helpful to, can you expand a little bit on that, Linda? I think that would be helpful for our audience. Talk about what that looks like.
So, everything that we've talked about, like all those pieces that you're collecting and the data and everything like that, the things that you had discussed about, all that evidence that you're bringing, what does that mean? What are the pieces that you're going to use? What are the measures that you're thinking of using? All right. Think about what are the outcomes? What is it that you want? I mean, by the time they finish that program, what is it that you want them to be able to do? And really, if you're looking at quality assurance, that's tying that quality assurance in, because that's what you're going to use then to come back and say, now here we have these measures, which would be your assessment system and all those pieces with that. Here we have those that are now going to show that what we have done within that program. So once you start with the assessment system, put that in place, tying to the outcomes that you want, right? Those are your, goals and objectives, or however you want to strategize that, right? Tie all that together. Then you've got that quality assurance system in place. So pulling in the stakeholders that you mentioned, all the partnerships that you have, things like that, but pulling all those pieces together. And then also taking in consideration funding, because I cannot ignore that particular piece also. All right. You cannot do it without determining within that might be part of your SWOT analysis. Within that, how are we going to fund this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda. I benefited from that conversation that you and I had once before, so I thought our audience would benefit as well. We had one other question that came through on the registration, so I'm going to touch base on that, and then we'll open it up to the questions that are in our Q&A. And that question said, what does alignment look like for an SEA serving as the intermediary sponsor? So I jotted down all of my thoughts, and I put it into ChatGPT and I said, create a graphic for me. So I'm going to share that in the chat for you to look at, but really looking at what does that alignment look like from an SEA lens, and really just high level touching it, certainly looking at your state education priorities. What are your priorities, strategic goals at your district or your state education agency? Looking at your K-12 and your higher education system, what is the framework? What do those articulated agreements look like? What does the curriculum look like? How do you align those? And then, of course, we have to make sure the USDOL apprenticeship standards are aligned with this work. We have to make sure that we engage our workforce systems. When I started this work in West Virginia, I established weekly, bi-weekly meetings with my USDOL office and my Department of Commerce and my Department of Workforce Development under Department of Commerce. And I went and met because there's a shared language that has to be identified. They didn't speak education and I didn't speak workforce. So having those established meetings, we educated each other, invaluable to have those established partnerships and relationships. Looking at the data and accountability, we've talked about that. Your stakeholder support. We did a statewide tour and went around the state and brought in our EPPs, our deans, our provosts, our presidents, our faculty and staffs of our colleges of ed, and had conversations about what that RTI would look like, what the technical assistance, what the wraparound supports would look like, what the learning objectives would be, and then of course policy and funding. This is creating an opportunity for you to engage with your legislators, with your governor, with your state education agencies or your district agencies and their budgets. So I just dumped all of my thoughts into AI and said, make a graphic for me. So I'm sharing that with you, and you're welcome to have that and share as well. So we're coming up on about 10 minutes till the hour, so we're right on target, and we're going to look at our questions. So I'm going to pull those up, and Mark and Linda, feel free to jump in on any question that you believe aligns with AQUEP.
I think if it's all right, Carla, I'll just make I will defer on the first question. The first question that was posed in there was about a comparison of standards between different organizations, and that's not, we're happy to explain our standards, but not anyone else's. So I think we'll I'm afraid we'll have to let that one go. But Susan asked, when EPPs write their self-study report, they often focus on the unit data from all programs. Where could the specific apprenticeship data points go, which are very unique in the QAR? One of the things, which is our self-study report, quality assurance report, one of the features of our requirements for the self-study report is that we require that data be disaggregated by license area, by the program that the candidates are in. So by the license area and by the program delivery model. So the answer to that question is there would be a separate line of data to explore that. But I think the key thing is all of those elements of data would fit under the aspects of the standards. So for example, evidence of culture responsive practice, it has to be there for all programs. Well, it would just be written, separate line or separate display for the registered apprenticeship program. What this helps you do, by the way, is look across your programs to make sure that all of them are equally strong, or to find places where there's some strengths that that you can learn from, or places where there's some challenges. So I'm assuming people can still put further response. So Susan, if that didn't answer your question, please add an additional question in about it. But it's actually a feature of the system to ask folks to break it out so that you got a real specifics that you could, by reading the report and looking just at the evidence from the apprenticeship program, or reading the report just looking at the elementary prep data, or reading the report just looking at the secondary prep data, right? You get a sense of the relative strengths of each of the programs. So,
And Ben on our staff, Ben, would you like to provide some additional context there?
Yeah, sure thing. I'll just coming off mute here.
That's okay.
Yeah, and Carla, specifically to kind of what Mark just referenced, or yeah, can you just clarify?
Sure. I just had a note that said that you would like to answer this question. When EPPs write their QAR, they often focus on their unit data. Where might the specific apprentice data points go into the QAR? That may just be a AQUEP question. I apologize. I just had a note there that said you would like to answer this question. So
Oh, yeah.
that's definitely.
Oh, no problem. Yep, that's I've just answered it live. That's just the function of answering it live. But
Perfect. I apologize. Thanks,
no, no
Ben.
problem.
yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. Our state apprenticeship agency requires all those evidences unique to the program. Is the EPP encouraged to add all of these to the QAR?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for that question as well. We would encourage I think I think there's a place for all of that data. And I was looking at the list and listening to you describe it, Carla, and I think all of those pieces of evidence can fit somewhere. Um, of course, for our purposes of doing accreditation, of doing quality assurance, we do focus on the things that are in our standards. But there's a whole lot of great standard four stuff. Here, our standard four is how is the EPP engaged with the school system to improve the overall system, and within that, doing follow up with completers and finding out how they're doing in the field. There's a lot of things that you can't track down for everybody, but wow, for folks in the registered apprenticeship program, you can track some data that you couldn't elsewhere, and we would welcome all of that to be in it. Mhm.
Excellent. How are programs documenting on-the-job learning activities to provide evidence of meeting course outcomes for related instruction besides logging hours? Any additional resources?
Maybe I'll start with that, Linda, and see if you want to come in with anything. Um, we encourage our members to take a look at the outcomes they desire, and it really goes along with Linda's comment about building the assessment system and thinking about how will we know if they have achieved them. And so it could be through an observation protocol, it could be through a task that's given, it could be through an assignment in some element of the coursework. So it's definitely well beyond logging the hours. And of course, logging the hours is important, but I think that would be where all the parties in the program would want to work together and say, well, what are we going to count as evidence that this outcome has been achieved? What are we going to count as evidence that the apprentice has learned to do formative assessment well? Well, chances are it would be implementing some learning experience and providing formative assessment to candidates, and probably on the basis of a rubric. And here's where the Danielson framework, or I'm blanking on the name,
Marzano.
or
Marzano.
Marzano, and some other folks who do wonderful. Susan Brookhart's work on evaluation, I was thinking as well, right? And could be brought in. So it's really being sure what's going to count as proof of that, and what's the level of performance we expect. And those are two things that have to be done for any type of program to ensure that the competencies that you want a new educator to demonstrate have been demonstrated to your satisfaction.
It's always amazing to me when I talk with other providers and we talk about an assessment system and what does that look like and how do you know all these components and how do you determine what can really give you a clear evaluation of some of those outcomes. And they come up with exactly what Mark just listed. I mean, it was just and it's really just sitting and talking with your colleagues to find out what are some of the things that that we could brainstorm. What are some of the things that we could do in an ideation meeting, to really think about how do we build that assessment system and where do all those components, those constructs fit within the process, within the system.
Yeah, including things that are already in the system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
so leveraging
Yeah.
the things that are already present in a school district's say teacher observation system to say, well, we have a way of doing that.
Right.
We know how to look at that. Let's do that. And if we do it that way, come to think of it, you'll be one step ahead when you get your first evaluation next year. So
Yeah.
as much as we can link in to existing practices, but as you say, Linda, brainstorming and thinking about all the possibilities and coming up with the best set to give everyone confidence, to give the apprentices feedback and to move them forward.
Yeah, it always amazes me when people get together and go, "Oh, wait a minute, we have that." So or maybe we could change it and have
We're
this,
good.
okay,
We're
or
good
make
at
it like this.
reinventing
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
round thing that helps you roll around. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a great question here. How does AAQEP support an educator prep provider in expanding access to apprenticeship pathways in a way that actively addresses the educator shortage by reaching individuals who might not have enrolled in an EPP without the apprenticeship option, rather than simply reinforcing current enrollment patterns?
Well, in our standard four, we have the requirement that all EPPs show us how they are working with local, regional, and state partners to address educator workforce needs and to promote a diverse educator workforce. And also, actually, a new thing in our new standards, and to ensure that the instruction they're providing in the program matches the needs of the schools, what they're doing. So our standards, um, encourage our members to be engaged in those kind of conversations with a number of partners. Um, and
And also with each other.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
that's the
Yeah.
cohort model that we have that is so extremely
Yep.
valuable in a question like this, because, you know, sometimes you can get locked in thinking, okay, I'm not really sure how to do this. And so when you meet with the cohorts, we have monthly cohort meetings with people, you know, from other institutions and providers across the nation. And when you meet with them, you bring that question to the table, you know, and it's amazing, again, breaking down those silos and hearing what other people, the ideas that they have, that you can maybe not take that idea, but bounce off and come up with something that's related to it. So really, really powerful in that collaboration that we build and really and try to support.
Community of practice, absolutely.
Yes.
When you present those problems of practice and have an opportunity to learn from each other. The National Center for Grow Your Own has a state education network. We meet once a month. We have a district network that meets once a month. And so if you're a state education leader, or if you're a district education leader and you're interested in either of those networks, please, you can ask to be join those on our website that Ben posted earlier. But really, those are opportunities for those leaders to propose those problems of practice and really spend time digging in. And I know from my perspective, when I was in West Virginia, that was invaluable to be able to have that community where I could learn. And that last question that we discussed, really looking at the population that we're serving through registered apprenticeship is largely non-traditional. So how can we make those flexibilities work for that working individual, for that high school student, for that para, for that sub who aspires to be teachers? Because if you go back to the very beginning of the definition of a Grow Your Own program, it's a clear articulated pathway where an aspiring teacher can become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. And registered apprenticeship breaks down that financial barrier and puts those supports in place. I think of my population in my home state, those wraparound supports and removing those financial barriers is invaluable to economic development in my state. So it's pretty exciting. We're coming up on the hour, so we've got one more question. Let's see if we can grab it before we finish. How does the apprenticeship model and AAQEP incorporate the state's educator preparation standards?
I can answer that real quickly from the AAQEP side, which is to say that's part of the curriculum alignment that everyone does in doing a quality assurance report, a self-study report. So we ensure that state standards are met. And I'm thinking that because registered apprenticeships are done within the state framework and leading to licensure, that alignment would be there as well and built in. Is that not true, Carla?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And one more, how do you remove the financial barriers? That's a great question. So there are multiple ways you can act. If you're a state education leader, you can remove those financial barriers by supporting your apprentices through your title money, through your legislator, through, we have multiple states. There's a U.S. Department of Labor funding through the State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula Grant. Most states applied and received those funds from the formula. And then several of our states received the competitive grants. So having those competitive RFP releases so you can support apprentices and have a competitive bidding process is very valuable. Continuously looking at what legislation is taking place in our states across the country and supporting reducing financial barriers through workforce development money, workforce innovation money, Department of Commerce money, workforce development funds. So yeah, would love to talk to you more about that, Jennifer, if you want to reach out and we can provide you some resources on that. But we are coming up on the hour. It has been a privilege, as always, to be on a webinar with Mark and Linda and the AAQEP team. Any final comments before we say goodbye?
Just reach out to us if you have any questions. We're happy to provide any information, and just delighted to work with this newer pathway into teaching that does lower barriers and gives folks the on-the-job experience that they need.
Yeah,
Same.
love to talk with you, and also happy to connect you with anyone else who is definitely doing this process with AAQEP. So thank you all very much.
Mhm.
Yes,
Thank you, Carla.
same here. We'd love to hear from you. If you reach out to info@ncgyo, we'd love to talk to you and provide you some additional support as well. Thank you for your time. We value your time. It's 4 o'clock Eastern time. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.